Funding for this program was provided by the Iowa Farm Bureau Federation, which celebrates 85 years of agriculture and rural Iowa, and salutes Iowa Public Television's strong commitment and years of service to the citizens of Iowa. By the RC2 Corporation, providing the die-cast toy collector with a variety of models, including Case, International, John Deere, and New Holland. By Successful Farming Magazine, serving the American farmer for more than a century, and publishers of the Ageless Iron Almanac, the Restorer's newsletter. Once rusted and forgotten, now restored, that's Ageless Iron. And by your local Napa Auto Parts store, supplying your parts needs since 1925.
Hello, I'm Mark Pearson, and this is my Model 70 John Deere tractor. Now, this is the same model of John Deere tractor that my father started farming with back in the 1950s. Tractors revolutionized food production in American agriculture. They replaced the horse, and now the hobby of collecting and restoring old tractors has taken the world by storm. Old tractors and the people who love them, coming up.
There's a life story to pretty much every piece of equipment.
Well, to a large part of the hobby, it's legacy.
And there's just something romantic about a tractor.
I like my tractor.
I love the sound, the feel, the torque.
There's just something about an old tractor. Whether it's the first replacement to your grandfather's adored team of horses, the tractor you grew up driving on the farm, or you simply appreciate these majestic machines, timeless tractors bring back memories. From the beginning of time, agriculture has been associated with back-breaking labor for both man and beast. Then, at the dawn of the 20th century, when civilization was enjoying an explosion of technological advances, the arrival of the mechanical mule transformed agriculture forever. The farm tractor lifted the burden from the backs of the farmer and the horse and revolutionized agriculture. Farmers who had revered their workhorses and cared for them with affection now transferred that fondness to their first tractor. Farmers were grateful these new machines needed neither feed nor rest and were an expense only when in use. They took to power farming with the same enthusiasm people were taking to the automobile.
My dad died at an early age. Otherwise, he could easily be alive today. And I always think about what he taught me about farming and his stories of picking corn 2 rows at a time, with the wagon and the horses, 100 bushel a day. 14 years old, he worked for the neighbors and got $1 a day doing that. When I was 14 years old, we picked corn with a 2-row picker mounted on an M farmall, hauled in with a couple of H's. And we could do 1,000, 1,500 bushel on a Saturday real easily. When my daughter was 14 years old, she sat in the buddy seat of my combine. I believe it was a 12-row head. We were following alongside with a 1,000 bushel wagon, and she wanted to know how many bushel the wagon held. And when I related back to the 100 bushel a day, the 1,400 bushel a day, and now we're filling this wagon in 45 minutes to an hour with a 12-row head. And then I asked her the question, which 2 rows would you like to get out there now and walk between and pick them by hand and holler at the horses? Look at how many times we've multiplied our efficiency with what one person did 2 generations ago to today, what we're doing with one person. It's just phenomenal what we've changed.
Before the advent of the tractor, farmers generally owned less than 40 acres of land, most of which was pasture to feed a team of horses and a few cows. As farm sizes began to expand, extra burden was put on the horses. Then, in 1937, many horses died because of an epidemic called equestrian sleeping sickness. This influenced farmers even more to utilize tractors in the field. Some farmers did have a hard time letting go of their horses. They didn't like these newfangled machines. And a battle raged between horse associations and tractor manufacturers as to which was the best for the farmer. The American Horse Association proclaimed the horse and man-made civilization. They should forever stand inseparable. Meanwhile, tractor salesmen like to tell their potential customers who were debating about which way to go, remember, the iron horse eats only when it's working.
I have a 1020 Titan, which is international. And it was probably, as everybody has said, it's one of the first really successful small tractor, which at that time most of the farms were. And when I got it fixed up and drove it around, I wondered what the heck a farmer would want something like this. And then it dawned on me, it was better than looking at the rear end of a mule, you know, on a plow.
Horses done all they could do, and they got tired. Just like the people that walked behind them. And a tractor, you could get on it, and there was no end to how long it would run.
The history of farm tractors in America is one of cycles repeated. Droughts and crop failures, giving way to booms and overproduction, giving way to wars and recessions. Its evolution has been a long process, beginning before the American Civil War with steam engines, through the beginnings of the internal combustion era, through 2 world wars and the Great Depression, and on into the diesel engine era. And through the years, there have been milestones, mediocrity, and those tractors that people couldn't pay a farmer enough to get off their hands. One such a tractor was sold to a Nebraska farmer and legislator, Wilmot Crozier. When the machine broke down on the way back to his farm, he saw to it that a law was passed in Nebraska in 1919 requiring extensive testing of tractors before they could be sold. The same year, a facility to test tractors was established on the campus of the University of Nebraska in Lincoln.
The first test was in 1920, and the first tractor to meet its own advertised claims was the Waterloo Boy, which is right behind me, and it was manufactured in Waterloo, Iowa. The company was purchased by John Deere, and so that this tractor is the predecessor of all John Deere tractors. We've tested every tractor commercially viable in the United States since that time, and continue to test those manufactured in the United States, plus some foreign tractors.
Since 1920, the Nebraska Tractor Test Laboratory has evaluated more than 1,750 models of tractors, and the testing continues today. The lab is known around the world as a leader in tractor testing and is the only one of its kind in the United States. Housed in the original Nebraska Tractor Test facility is the Lester F. Larson Tractor Test and Power Museum, honoring the chief engineer for the lab from 1946 to 1975. Larson was also instrumental in initiating the collection of historic tractor test equipment, as well as tractors that illustrate key developments in agricultural machinery over the decades. Improvements like replacing the old steel wheels with rubber tires, addressing noise levels, and creating features that made tractors safer for farmers.
We've done more than just test a tractor as such. We've been proactive in bringing in new areas of concern for the farmer. And so I think we've been quite critical in the fact that the tractor evolved very rapidly. It evolved to a safe machine, and the United States led the evolution of the tractor, still continues to lead, even though we've lost a lot of manufacturing capacity to Europe and Japan and so on. Still, we are the leader in new innovations.
The development of gasoline engine tractors was preceded by 40 years of steam engines in agriculture. Despite the formidable size of steam engines, there are some who seek the iron beast. One unexpected collector is Melinda Huisinga, a city girl who grew up to love watching the massive steam engines at the annual Old Threshers reunion in her hometown of Mount Pleasant, Iowa.
It must be how big they are, and I marvel at the technology to think that mine's a 1915, but they made them before that turn of the century, and I just marvel that they're still operating.
Today, she, along with her husband, owns and operates her own steam engines. A 1915 JIK 65 horsepower, a half-scale replica of the same model, and a Case water wagon. Huisinga recalls how she got started collecting steam engines.
Every year I'd take my son, and we'd take all the neighbor kids, and later our daughter. After she was born, we'd go down every year, and we'd be in the ticket booth with my dad, helping to sell tickets. And when the boys reached junior high age, they went to a steam school, and they both learned how to operate steam engines, and later taught me. So our son and his friend Ryan did this every year during high school and college days. And then when our son died in 1995, at age 21, he had a rare heart condition, enlarged heart we weren't aware of. And so then that's kind of what prompted me at that point to buy my own engine, dedicated in his memory, and carry on the tradition at Old Thrashers with my family.
When she decided to buy her own steam engine, there was no question of what kind, and she traveled to Racine, Wisconsin, where the engines were made, to find it.
My dad and our son's friend Ryan, we packed up that October day on a mission. And the minute I saw it, I knew that was it. It was a 65 horsepower Case. It was running that day, so we had a chance to operate it, and became friends with the family, who wondered, what in the world are you going to be doing with this? We explained about Old Thrashers in Mount Pleasant. They came the next year, fell in love with it. They come back every year with their camper and all their friends, and now they're part of our extended family.
The first Case steam engine, called Old No. 1, made its debut in 1869 in Racine, Wisconsin. It was self-propelled, but pulled to the job site by a team of horses. In 1878, Case added propulsion to its engines, but retained horse steering. Over the next 20 years, Case would become the dominant steam engine manufacturer, continually making improvements in its machines. By 1900, its engines were outselling all the competition. But by 1915, the year that Huisinga's Case was built, production had dropped to 950 engines, and production ceased in 1926, 57 years after Old No. 1. The Pioneer steam engines were massive and mighty machines, but still needed to be pulled through the fields by horses. The advent of the tractor meant a new day was dawning on the farm, and a way of life was coming to an end. The transition from horsepower to tractor power ushered in the most dramatic changes in the history of agriculture. By the 1920s, efforts were being made to design smaller, more efficient tractors. Farmers, now convinced of the advantages over horses, began buying the Fordsons, Farmalls, Johnny Poppers, and Olivers. These early tractor models, however, did have their shortcomings, in particular, refusing to start in cold weather. For the most part, though, many tractors built during the early to mid-1900s represented quantum leaps in technology. Frankly, the advances in design and engineering of farm tractors during this time have never been duplicated. This might explain why many of those early tractors are anxiously sought after by antique collectors today.
And there are a lot of different tractor companies, names that we no longer have heard of. The Friday, the Love, the Tiemann was made at Albert City. There are places, little towns that had companies that built tractors. So there's a lot of history. It's really interesting.
Old tractors are like old friends, reminding us of the past. They bring with them a familiarity, a sense of comfort, and they aren't complicated like the tractors of today. These antiques take collectors back to a time when men could work on their own machinery and actually fix it. It's a matter of taking something that is old and wrecked, and with some luck and skill, having it running again. There's a satisfaction to that. There's also a connection to the past. Just as the horse had been a partner working the land, the first tractors were almost a part of the family. Farmers worked with their tractors from sunup to sundown, through the best and worst of weather. And when it was time to put it away for the night, a farmer might find himself patting his tractor for a job well done, just as he had for his favorite team of horses.
Grandfathers used to love their horses. That same pride was connotated in the tractor. And the tractor was like the family car. It was a symbol of your prosperity to have a tractor, and a good-looking tractor. It meant that you were somebody, that you had this tractor. You were modern, and you were kind of wealthy enough to afford one. And so it became this strong symbol of prosperity in agriculture to have the horsepower.
Dave Mowat, senior editor of Successful Farming Magazine, a nationally distributed agriculture magazine produced in Des Moines, Iowa, grew up on a farm in central Nebraska. In 1989, while covering a story for the magazine, he stumbled onto a tractor collector story. He came across a farmer who had dozens of restored tractors, and as Mowat drove away from the farmstead, he remembers thinking, "This guy really needs to get a life." Months later, that article about the tractor collector got more response from readers than any other story in the magazine's history. The story garnered so much attention that a running series called Ageless Iron was created and continues today. While Mowat was initially mystified by the tractor collecting craze, he soon understood what all the fuss was about. He realized that he too had a fondness for old iron, and like so many other people, had vivid memories of driving his grandfather's tractor for the first time.
I can describe to you the day it happened to me, the weather and even the smell of the soil, when my grandfather took me out and I got to run his John Deere B. And after we'd made a round or two, my grandfather got off and says, "Well, son, there's the field." And he started walking back home. And I remember thinking, whoa, man, I've made it now. I'm like my older brothers. I get to drive the tractor. And you couldn't have pried me off that tractor at that point in time with blasting caps, hoping that a neighbor would drive by and eventually this happened so I could wave at him. He'd wave at me and think, oh, the Mowat boy's out on the tractor. It was a big deal.
For a farm kid, driving the tractor for the first time is an unforgettable moment. But you didn't have to grow up on a farm to like old tractors. And you don't have to live in the country now to collect old tractors either. The surprising thing is that it's not just an agricultural hobby. In fact, most people who hunt for antique tractors aren't farmers. People who collect them come from all over the United States and from different parts of the world. Collectors are all around us, disguised as doctors, airline pilots, mechanics, and in some cases, even teenagers. 13-year-old Jessica Wagner is like most other teenage girls. She likes playing sports, watching movies, and having her friends over for slumber parties. But she also enjoys helping her dad restore old iron. And she is fond of one tractor in particular.
It's an Alice Chalmers WC, and well, first of all, like tractors, period, are just like kind of fun because they're easy to drive and stuff. But I think part of the reason I like it so much is it came from Kansas from my uncle, and he's like, yeah, he's just kind of special.
Paul Wagner owns an auto mechanic shop, so his interest in the technology of tractors is natural. He restores the machines he collects in his shop with the help of co-workers, friends, and family.
I enjoy getting them running, pull them out of the field. Want a tractor that hasn't run in some of these tractors haven't run in 30 years, and it was running within an hour. And that to me is amazing that something can sit around for 30 years and you can have it running in an hour.
It wasn't hard for Paul to convince the rest of his family to love old tractors. All he had to do to get his wife Sandy and his son Garrett on board was to find a tractor for each of them to call their own. Sandy has a Massey Harris 101 Junior, and Garrett took a liking to a Farmall Cub. But even before Garrett was old enough to drive his Cub, his parents remember him asking for birthday tractor have on his second birthday. And today, his room is filled with toys and a quilt made by his grandmother, covered in what else? Tractors. In addition to collecting timeless tractors, the Wagners enjoy reminiscing about the fun they've had with their machines and the people they've met through the hobby.
Well, the tractor shows like, Tulare, for example, you can go up there, spend the weekend. You can go to a church service on the tractor show ground, have a tractor parade at 11 o'clock. You can have a dinner, and everybody's very friendly, very helpful. They enjoy seeing a kid on a tractor, you know, especially the people that have been in it, you know, for a long time, to see that next generation moving up and enjoying something that we enjoy.
From the 1930s through the 1950s, tractor makers began to settle on distinctive colors to set their machines apart from the rest. These trademark colors were adopted by the industry, and the distinctive colors were easily identified in the field. Many vintage tractor collectors, such as the Wagner family, are non-denominational when it comes to the make or color of their old iron. But then there are those collectors who are loyal to one brand and one brand only.
Let's think. Well, I've got loads of different varieties.
No, you don't.
Seriously,
You only
I'll
have
say
John Deere's.
John Deere only, I'm afraid. I have restored some other breeds of tractors, some sobs, as they say in the States.
Sobs?
Sobs, some other breeds.
I was born about 6 months before my dad bought his first new John Deere tractor in 1929. And I've been with green and yellow tractors ever since.
Like father, like son, often the love for a specific kind of tractor was passed down through the generations of a family. If Grandpa swore by a John Deere, then John Deere it was for coming generations. It was rare that a farm family would switch color, a habit irritating to tractor dealers trying to convince stubborn farmers to give their product a try.
I've redone some red ones and orange, a little bit of everything, but I lean towards the green and yellow.
It's not unusual for many antique tractor collectors to be partial to the green and yellow. Frank Jones of Winterset, Iowa, is a retired mechanic who restores John Deeres for himself and others.
There's not very many two-cylinder John Deere mechanics left. Most of them have retired, many of them have passed on. And I have, every once in a while, a young fellow that's interested in that kind of stuff that comes along and picks your brain. And I had a couple of old mechanic friends when I was a young fellow that was awful good to show me. So now it's my turn to pass it on.
John Deere did not make tractors until it purchased the Waterloo Gasoline Engine Company in 1918, maker of the Waterloo Boy tractor. The first Waterloo design and built tractor bearing the John Deere name rolled off the assembly line 5 years later. In 1934, the Model A, commonly called the Poppin' Johnny, was introduced. Its two-cylinder engine had the distinct pop, pop, chug, chug sound that told farmers it was green and yellow coming long before they could see it. The John Deere Model B, another tractor made in 1934, introduced more farmers to power farming than any other tractor. From its introduction in 1935 until its retirement in 1952, well over 300,000 Model B tractors were delivered. The 2,800-pound B was designed to compete with a team of horses and not cost much more.
I started out on this B John Deere, 20, 30 horses, and when I left the farm my last year of college, when I'd go home and work in the summers, I left pulling a 32-foot disc on a four-wheel drive, the largest four-wheel drive tractor John Deere made. And that change was pretty dramatic on the way out. And yes, I cling to my farm heritage, not with that four-wheel drive tractor, but rather with the little B John Deere that is now being restored.
Another admired John Deere was the Model D, one of the most famous farm tractors ever. It holds the record for the longest production run of any American tractor, from 1923 to 1953, a 30-year run. The D was the first tractor on many American farms, the mechanical mule that replaced horses, the machine that broke the prairie side, and the tractor that helped provide food for a growing nation. Another example of the diversity among vintage collectors and restorers is personified in Nigel Burgess and Pam Davis of England. Originally from Des Moines, Iowa, Pam is an administrator at Cambridge University. While writing an article for Successful Farming magazine about collectors in the UK, she met Nigel Burgess. an English countryman who is quite fond of John Deere tractors. He loves old iron so much that he has 30 John Deeres of his own and does restoration work for other collectors as well.
I interviewed Nigel and we just became good friends after
That's
that.
it. We rub shoulders and pick pumpkins and go to tractor shows ever since.
That's right. Haul me around in your muck spreader.
And now I'm trying to dupe you into buying one.
Yeah, this is the only problem. Is my husband now, who poo-pooed the whole idea of tractors when I said, oh, I'm going to do this tractor piece about Nigel, this guy that I met there, and da-da-da. And, oh, tractor, you train spotter, why would you want to do that? Boring, boring, boring. Now he's wanting to buy a tractor, and I keep having fights with these two boys about, no, you're not buying a tractor, there's no place to keep it. And
you've got a finer collection of tractor books than what I have on your bookshelf.
that's right, and he spent every last pound we have on tractor books. And one week he wants an A, and then he wants an unstyled B, and then he wants an L. I don't know what you two are scheming now. But it's quite scary.
Press-steel chassis B, actually.
Oh, God, I don't want to know.
Nigel became interested in John Deere's when he attended an agricultural show in the United States and walked away with a bunch of John Deere tractor collecting brochures. At the time, he had 2 large Deeres on the farm where he lived. When he began collecting and restoring, it was with the purpose of actually using the machines on his farm.
Because we are farmers still, and we have a large acreage, we like to actually get the tractors that we restore and practice or try out the tractors that I'm restoring for customers on our own land. So we're actually putting them to use rather than just looking at them as if they're an oil painting. So
well, that's probably influenced my interest in tractors, because Nigel often introduces me to lots of people who collect tractors, but I have to say that my favorite, I'm not putting anybody down who likes to just collect them for collecting's sake, but I like to watch them work, and to me, I can't see having one of these great old tractors not running it, and machines need to be run.
Absolutely. You come on the road runs
and I
with
come
us.
on the road runs. In fact, I saw my PhD supervisor who was cycling by, and I was sitting at the back of this muck spreader, which always raises quite a lot of smiles when we go down the street. Nigel's kitted it out with old car seats, so it's quite a comfortable ride. And I'm driving down the road in the back of this tractor, and I look over, and there was my PhD supervisor, who looks at me completely stunned, thinking, what is that woman doing in there? And I just waved and smiled.
He nearly went into the ditch as well, didn't he?
Nigel and Pam aren't alone in their fondness for timeless tractors. Collectors can be found all over the world, from rural Iowa, where you'd expect to find them, to, of all places, Beverly Hills, California. Yes, Beverly Hills, home of Rodeo Drive and the sign on the hill. But parked among the Rolls Royces and Ferraris of this posh neighborhood are also antique tractors.
In this neighborhood, and where I live totally, and the way I live totally, it's absolutely cuckoo. No, well, what's the 67-year-old guy living in this kind of an atmosphere need even one tractor?
Jimmy Duffy III is a member of the oldest family in California, being a 9th-generation Californian. His mother's side arriving directly from Spain. Residing in Beverly Hills his entire life, he has been a collector of many fine things, including classic cars, toys, and, interestingly enough, Amish buggies. The neighbors in his elite neighborhood are always interested in what will appear at Duffy's house next. And they really took notice when he came home with his first antique tractor, a 1935 John Deere B.
One day, everybody was teasing me. They says you close the door and every night there's another tractor in there. You know, they're having babies or something. We ended up with 11 of them, all restored. And everybody came on the weekends after work and everything, and we worked on them here and painted them. We had so much fun.
Even though Duffy grew up in much different circumstances than the farmers who long ago used the tractors he collects, he appreciates American agriculture and the role these machines have played in its history.
I think about a man sitting on that tractor for 10, 15 hours, 12 hours a day, eating his dust that he's creating, smelling that smoke from the exhaust, being pushed around by the wind and the breeze, the hot, sticky, humid climate. This was the very beginning of our economy. The economy and the farm is really what started it all. We went from the farm to the industry because the industry had to grow to support the farm output. And it's really, really the solid basis of our economy. And it's the solid basis of the American dream.
Many antique tractor collectors believe a large part of the hobby is teaching younger generations the importance of tractors and their essential role in the mechanization of agriculture. Another thing they value is the camaraderie they feel for others seeking unique relics of the past. And Duffy isn't the only LA resident who collects tractors. Several of his friends have become avid collectors. Former Los Angeles police officer Mike Boland brought his John Deere A to Beverly Hills to share stories of old iron with Duffy, an old friend of his. Originally from Burlington, Iowa, Boland grew up on a farm and remembers driving his dad's tractors.
I started driving tractor when I was about 3 years old. My dad needed to shuck corn, and so he was picking corn by hand. We were poor. This was in the 40s, and he had a 1942 VAC case, and it had a hand clutch, and all I had to do was hit the starter button and pull the hand clutch, and we were moving.
For years, Boland would drive by a small California town eyeing John Deere tractors sitting on the lawn of a farmhouse. One day, he decided to knock on the door to see if the owner of the equipment would be willing to sell one of them. He wrote a check for the John Deere A that very day, an investment he's never regretted.
When they went away from manufacturing the two cylinders, I was very disappointed because I love the sound, the feel, the torque, and it's just fun to open up the petcocks and turn the gas on, put the choke down and crank it, and the rhythm that it has is, there's something magical about it.
I like taking something that looks terrible and make it look good.
Don Hacker, one of Duffy's dearest friends, also loves these antique machines. In fact, he drove a lowboy filled with a few of his favorite tractors all the way from Northern California to visit his old pal Duffy. They've been fellow collectors for years, helping each other find unique tractors all over the country. Hacker has been in the tractor business since 1963 and is part owner, along with his son, in Hacker Equipment Company.
Well, I look past the junk, past the rust, past the flat tires. This one had all 4 flat tires. It was rusty, and it didn't run. I like to tear them down to nothing, and then reassemble them up like new ones. And that's what I've done with these.
For the last 100 years, America has had a love affair with the farm tractor. While these heavy horses were making their way into the history books, for the most part, the word tractor was not commonly used until the early 1900s. It was in 1906 when the Hart-Parr Company wanted to replace the longer expression gasoline traction engine in its advertisements that they began to use the word tractor. Today, the word tractor is on nearly everyone's minds. Hart-Parr of Charles City, Iowa, built a full line of tractors between 1901 and 1918. But the most famous was the 3060, called Old Reliable. In 1897, Charles Hart and Charles Parr founded the Hart-Parr Gasoline Engine Company, while they were both engineering students at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. In 1900, they moved their operation to Hart's hometown, Charles City, Iowa, because of trouble they were having raising capital. Since he and his family were well known there, the two youngsters had access to the capital they needed to venture into their own business. Hundreds of Hart-Parr Old Reliable tractors were sold to settlers for pulling the heavy sod-breaker plows opening up the Great Plains. Over the years, the Hart-Parr Company would go through several mergers and name changes, including Hart-Parr to Oliver and from Oliver to White. The plant in Charles City, Iowa, closed for good in July of 1993.
There's certain feelings I have about antique tractors and antique things in general, especially farm things.
Herc Bouris's dad came to the United States from Greece in 1904 with $5 in his pocket and would eventually move to California's Menifee Valley in 1922 to run an orchard and vineyard farm. Herc wasn't interested in this type of farming, so in 1951, he bought the home place where he started a wheat farm. Today, another generation of Bourises continues the wheat farming operation and helps continue a legacy Herc started in collecting old iron.
Well, we still have my grandfather's cross motor case, and it's been in the family the whole time. And so my dad first rebuilt that in about probably about 76. He rebuilt it once, and then since then, and in the 90s, it's been rebuilt again. So that's just where he started.
Herc's son Mike helps him find the old tractors, while Herc's second cousin Pete does the restoration work on them and gets them ready for shows.
Almost everything I've done is just I've caught my eye. It's kind of, when I was younger, it's like looking at women, beautiful women, you know, one is more attractive to, you know, and that's the way it is. I prefer stuff before 1930, and even out of before 1920 if possible, but they're getting rarer and rarer. The biggest joy I get is not after it's fixed. It's to have a mind's picture when I get something, how it's going to look like when it's finished.
By 1915, a farm tractor cost anywhere from $400 to $4,000, which was a lot of money for a small farmer. Then in 1917, Henry Ford developed the Fordson tractor. The timing was right, and at just $785, the price was right too. There were more than 750,000 Fordson tractors built in the United States between 1917 and 1928. The Fordson became the Model T of farm tractors, and by 1920 accounted for 70% of the world tractor market. Why call it Fordson and not just Ford? When Henry Ford came out with this model, there was already a tractor bearing his name.
It happened to be this tractor that I'm standing next to, a model of this tractor, which they called a Ford, and it was manufactured in Minneapolis. The company had hired a hardware store clerk whose last name was Ford and made him the vice president of the company so they could call this a Ford tractor. And that's the reason when Henry Ford came out with a tractor, he had to call it a Fordson. He couldn't call it Ford.
The Ford Ferguson 9N was one of the greatest and most significant tractors of the 20th century. Weighing just 2,300 pounds, the workhorse could plow 12 acres in a day with two 14-inch plows. At the peak of its popularity, 9,000 Ford N-Series tractors were being delivered per month. Irishman Harry Ferguson had made a deal with Henry Ford to combine his engineering principles of the draft control, the three-point hitch, and an implement system with the Fordson model. They introduced their joint creation in 1939 as the Ford Ferguson 9N. Their deal was made on a handshake agreement, but in 1948, the famous pact was broken. After a bitter lawsuit, Henry Ford II settled by paying Ferguson $12 million. Ferguson went on to produce his own tractors and later sold out to Massey Harris, which then became Massey Ferguson.
I went to California to buy crawlers, and because I was in the construction and I liked the crawlers, and I'd have to stop in as high as 6-7 years and visit with them, and then finally they'd say you can have it. And there's a life story to pretty much every piece of equipment.
Collecting old iron strikes some people like a bolt of lightning. One day they don't have a tractor, and the next day they are enthusiasts. It starts by buying their first tractor. Then they buy a backup one. Couldn't pass this one up. This one was a great deal. And before they know it, they practically have tractors growing out of their ears. Larry Mosdam is one such collector. For years, Mosdam enjoyed collecting farm toys. And then his toys grew a little larger when he started hunting for life-size machines. Managing a construction company based in Clarion, Iowa, Mosdam has always been interested in machinery.
There's people think it's junk. I even have once in a while the city kind of gives me a bad time. But then here The latter part of August, we had 200 people here one day just looking through this stuff. They were from all over the United States.
Benjamin Holt's steam Caterpillar was the first successful agricultural crawler during the early 1900s. Later versions were found to be useful in logging operations, on construction sites, and on road grading jobs. Since buying his first crawler over 20 years ago, Maasdam has been obsessed with the machines, collecting and restoring so many tractors that even he doesn't have an official count. Today, he has several sheds filled with old iron waiting to be restored. Many of Maasdam's finished projects are on display in a museum in Clarion. But no matter where his tractors are located, people from all over like to come share in the memories these iron workhorses evoke.
When I was a kid in grade school, in a country school, I hated history. And after I get older, I love history.
Maasdam also enjoys taking his old iron on tractor rides, an aspect of the hobby that has become popular all over the world. Collectors like getting together to talk about their machines and having the opportunity to get them running again. Like many old tractor lovers, Maasdam brought one of his antiques on my Great Iowa Tractor Ride. I started the Great Iowa Tractor Ride in 1997, and it's hosted by WHO Radio in Des Moines. There were 150 riders that first year, and the number has increased dramatically each year.
Oh, it's very exciting. I tell people where I'm going for summer and what I'm doing, and they don't understand, but we like it.
My dad purchased this brand new in 1954, so it's been on the farm essentially since that time.
Now you're a cardiac surgeon, but you still spend time on a tractor.
Oh, I love it. It's great time. It's great downtime in a way to get away.
Collecting old iron often has to do with a person's heritage. Finding their father or grandfather's long-lost tractor is what gets many started. The hunt is exciting, but restoring the antique back to its original luster is so rewarding. It reminds a collector of life on the farm.
That was what got me interested in tractors. I think just being around them, I rode hour after hour, sitting on the seat with my dad. I spent a lot of hours standing on the left-hand axle, hanging on to the light post, and I spent a lot of hours as I got taller standing on the side of the drawbar and hanging on, and eventually drove the tractor a lot. By the time I was 9 years old, 10 years old, I did farm chores, field work. Dad worked a second job, so I did a lot of work on the farm with this particular tractor.
John Kinzenbaugh grew up around tractors. Today, he is best known for his company, Kinsey Manufacturing, located in Williamsburg, Iowa, a company he started when he was 21 years old with $3,500 of borrowed money. Employing some 500 people, the company builds and distributes planters and grain carts around the world. The first tractor Kinsey remembers his dad using was a Farmall H, a tractor that was eventually traded for a Farmall Super M. But he never forgot about that H, a tractor he would try to find for years.
I glanced at it to see if I could recognize any part of it. In 1992, my son and I worked on a Cub Cadet project. We restored it for the 4-H project, and we entered that in the county fair. So we started looking at things inside the 4-H barn, and about 9 o'clock, before the lights were out, I happened to be looking at photos on the wall when I discovered pictures of this old tractor. I knew instantly that I had found Dad's old H, and I went to find the owner of the blue ribbon that was on the photo entry. I called him, we made a deal. Before we left the farm that day, I went to the pickup and I wanted to show him one other item, and that was a oak block. After Dad died, I brought the block home and always wished I could find the tractor that it went on, thinking, well, the best I could do is someday restore one like Dad's tractor and put it on that. And now all of a sudden I had the tractor and the block together for the first time in probably 38 years. So I demonstrated how the block went on the clutch pedal, how it flipped over, and how I could reach the clutch sitting on the seat when I was about 6 years old.
Farmall, a tractor made by International Harvester, was the first truly practical general-purpose tractor and was designed specifically to compete with the horse. The more horses a tractor replaced, the more dollars commanded. It was built like a tall tricycle, but its weight was in the right place for traction and stability. In 1924, Farmall sales exceeded all expectations and continued to set the pace for the row crop industry for years to come. Kinzenbaugh has the whole H. Farmall series from 1939 through 1954. He has so many tractors that he built shelves to store them.
When I was a kid going to country school, I used to bring home stray dogs because they were obviously hungry and in need. And it wasn't until years later that we discovered that people had figured out that I would rescue their unwanted dogs, and they'd dump them out at the country school. And of course, I'd end up taking them home. I think it's kind of gotten that way with the old H tractors and M Farmalls. I try to rescue all those old tractors in need.
Alice Chalmers was a merger of the largest builder of industrial steam engines, Edwin P. Alice, and William J. Chalmers, a manufacturer of mining equipment. Among the first tractors to consider alternatives to steel wheels, Alice Chalmers engineers mounted a set of Firestone airplane tires on the rear of an AC Model U. As early as 1930, they began experimenting with real pneumatic tires, which were developed into true low-pressure tractor tires. For the 1931 model year, rubber tires became standard equipment on the AC Model U. By 1934, all major manufacturers offered optional rubber tires. During World War II, the rubber shortage forced many farmers to go back to steel. But as soon as they could, they returned to rubber.
My dad taught me years ago, you always tuck your thumb under the crank. So if it kicks you, it doesn't tear your thumb off.
On a farm near Pomeroy, Iowa, you'll find numerous tractors spread out on the lawn of Steve and Rachel Rosenboom, their favorite being Alice Chalmers. For 20 years, Steve worked as an Alice Chalmers tractor mechanic and shop foreman, so he really got to know this type of tractor. His interest in collecting and restoring is one of legacy, from growing up on a farm and continuing to farm today.
I remember it very well. I would sit between my dad's legs, and there I'd be on the steering wheel. And it was, I can remember this like it was yesterday, because maybe I would ride with him from field to field, or I rode with him a lot. We'd go out in the field and I'd stay with him. I mean, it was part of it. And we'd be going down the road and he'd make a sound behind me, and I would turn around and think, well, there's a car, you know, here I'm steering, now I got to pull over a little bit, let this car pass. And he was just doing it as a joke. I guess I remember that.
While his sons, Paul and John, aren't carrying on the farming tradition, they are continuing the family's practice of collecting tractors. Early on, they helped their mom and dad restore the machines and enjoyed going to tractor shows and parades.
I remember riding on Dad's lap and him teaching me how to shift and run the clutch and stuff. And I was so small I'd have to stand up to step on the clutch, and I couldn't start it. He'd always have to start it and shut it off for me. But I remember following him in parades on this tractor.
Yeah, this is the first one I drove by myself. I drove other ones steering them, but this is the first legitimate drive. I remember running into a tractor in front of me in a parade one time with this, because we were so little we'd have to stand up and step down on the clutches, get them stopped. So it wasn't quite heavy enough, I don't think.
Each tractor has something different. So no, there's no one tractor that this is the tractor. This one, the boys did something with. This one, oh, the trip to pick it up was fun. This one was quite an experience trying to find information about it. I don't have a favorite.
I really can't say that I have a favorite either. You know, I like the rubber-tired tractors. They're easier to haul and load if you're going to a show, but boy, I like the steel-wheeled tractors too, because they're nice, and when you get them, there's just something about them, you know. But I like them all.
That's why we still have them all.
Yeah, I guess so.
While the mechanization of tractors continues, people are able to preserve the memories of the oldest models by collecting and restoring them. They're also creating new memories with their timeless tractors by running them in antique tractor shows, rides, and parades, and sharing their historical treasures with others. The computerized versions of today's giant diesel-run tractors will someday be collector items. Today's farmers will be the ancestors of future collectors. Tractors like the 8000 series from John Deere will be the tractors today's children will remember riding hour upon hour with their fathers and grandfathers, even falling asleep in the comfort of air-conditioned cabs.
I still always remember a friend told me, he said, for every four-wheel drive you see out in the field, he said there's one or two farmers that aren't farming today. And it's another farmer has picked up those acres just as the farmers retired, and maybe there wasn't young people there to take over the operation. But it's a sign of the times, I guess.
In 1910, there were 200 tractor manufacturers in North America. Today, only 4 exist worldwide: John Deere, Case New Holland, or C&H Global, AGCO, and Caterpillar. But where did all those tractors of yesterday go? It's hard to imagine that the monsters of today would ever wind up rusting away in an old shed or a faraway field. A lot of the tractor makers of yesterday were absorbed or acquired by the surviving major producers. Many simply went out of business or sold tractors for a few years only, like Sears Roebuck and Company, Russell and Company, and the Happy Farmer series. Despite Minneapolis Moline's UDLX of 1938, cabs did not become popular until the 1970s. At first, many farmers didn't like the idea of sitting inside because they wanted to see what was going on. Ironically, this tractor is among the most sought after of all vintage tractors. While the number of tractor manufacturers is far less than what it used to be, there is heavy interest in those companies that vanished, as well as those that continue making tractors. People who don't collect old tractors ask those who do, why? What is the allure of old iron?
It's the culture, the collecting culture that goes with the camaraderie, the spirit, the godmother and apple pie that this hobby represents. And that attracts people and draws them into the hobby, because you can go to an event, a tractor show or a threshing bee or a plowing match or a tractor ride, and end up at the end of it with new friends, and friends that really mean it when they say, hey, if you're ever in my neck of the woods, stop, stay overnight. We'd love to have you.
Nowadays, everyone's in a rat race, and life is so fast. Even looking at the tractors themselves, if you go through for the different eras, everything's getting faster and bigger. And I just wanted to take a bit of a step back, maintain that. If I've had a hectic week, I can just step back and I can get on my tractor and just go back an era just for a brief while and try and relax, basically.
Tractor buffs look back to the machines of their youth with sentimental longing. In many ways, the evolution of tractors mirrors the evolution of agriculture. Like the machines of today, farming too is a different beast. Collecting old tractors helps keep the memories of a bygone era alive. Through the hard work of their restorers, the history of these machines that revolutionized American agriculture lives on.
Just if those tractors could tell stories, of what they've done and where they've been and the things that they've accomplished, it'd be amazing, to know what those tractors did and how much labor they save. People don't have any idea how this stuff makes it to their table. That tractor did a lot of work to get it there.
Well, this may not be the cleanest restored old tractor in the world, but it's not a museum piece. It's still a working tractor on our farm. Tractors have changed a lot through the years, from 3 horsepower to 350 horsepower, but the way people feel about tractors hasn't changed. Whether you're in Beverly Hills, California, Pomeroy, Iowa, or over in England, there's just something about old tractors. Hey, thanks for watching. And remember, keep the old iron rolling.